Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. Thank you so much for joining us in person and online. And welcome to our workshop, so Workshop 232, in innovative approaches to AI teaching and fairness. A little bit more about our session today. So, we will be exploring innovative methods to teach AI fairness and governance, and this workshop will combine some expert insights, interactive sessions, example games, as well as policy discussions to foster inclusive and impactful discussions around education. Could you please move on to the next slide? Perfect. So let me introduce to you our speakers for today. We have over here Ayaz Karimov. He is a researcher in gamification and AI education and also a head of product at Swiss Cyber Institute. We also have our online speaker, Taima Abdelhadi. She's also a research analyst with a focus on human-centered technology. She's a United Nations Regional Youth Board member as well. And over here we also have Melissa Al-Ferrali. She is a global youth representative at the World's Organization for the Scouts Movement. All right, next slide, please. So for our workshop agenda, today we will be delving into serious games and how we can use serious games for AI education and teaching AI fairness. We will then discuss policy questions on inclusivity, frameworks, and the like. We'll delve into an example game session for you, and we'll be talking about project-based training for practical learning as well. And we'll finish it off with a Q&A session where you can ask questions to any of our speakers, and we will also be asking questions to the speakers itself. And so without further ado, I think we are going to get started with the objectives of this session. If possible, could you please move to the next slide? Next slide, please. Yes, awesome. So some of the objectives for this session, we'll be exploring AI fairness principles, discussing some frameworks around governance in AI, and introducing innovative teaching methodologies to enhance understanding. As this is a hybrid setup, we are looking to have our online participants ask questions through the Zoom itself and interact online, and all of the in-person attendees, please save your questions for later during the Q&A session, and we'll have an interactive segment later on. Can we please move on to the next slide? And the next one, please. All right, perfect. So I'm going to get started with our online speaker, Taima Abdelhadi. Taima, if you could get started for us. So I'll pass it off to her.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Taima. We can all hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for this introduction, and thank you so much for this very, very important topic and session today. I'll be the introduction for this session, and I'll start from the fairness topic. And I think this is important because we have been pretty much inclusive in discussing policies and discussing how can we make this more fit with the human rights sector, but we are not inclusive when it comes to technology. Oftentimes we keep the information and discussions regarding to how we shape the AI to the technical people, and I think that's very, very wrong because it's pretty much an interdisciplinary field right now. What I mean that it's a dynamic relationship between the users of this technology and the technology itself. When we use the AI model, we shape it by the information we give it, but it also shapes our understanding of the topics that we give it and ask it about. That means it's no longer just an input-output static output situation. It's a dynamic situation. And if we do not empower the users by knowledge and by feedback loops, we will have a pretty skewed AI model, or we will have frustrated users. And this leads to multiple problems. The first one is when you're focusing on algorithms themselves, we can have bias. This bias can be eliminated in two ways. The first way is by the makers themselves, who are our students, our future makers of technology. If we manage to install those concepts of fairness and how can we think about the human that we're making the technology to, as the code is being automated and we're allowed more time and space to think critically and imagine scenarios, then we can mitigate or at some point create safeguard methodologies to protect the users against algorithmic bias. The second part is the users themselves. If we empower users through an effective feedback loop, that means we can officially install and mitigate further damage by the bias that's happening. I'm totally against a concept that was installed traditionally, which is if the product is wrong, then we retrieve it, we fix it, and then we send it back. But right now, we don't have that luxury because you simply don't have any comparative context as a user. If you use, for example, ChatGPT and it gives you an answer, then you assume that's the full truth answer. Unless you take it and then you spread it on Reddit, like, for example, the David Mayer case, where some users raise concerns that we do not get any information if we ask it about certain names. It could be a privacy tactic, it could be a censorship tactic. But we don't have enough transparency from the AI model that tells us what is exactly happening. And the most dangerous thing is when it only gives us a little bit of information and we think that's all information available. One example that this could be dangerous in is when you ask it about a political figure and it gives you all the great nice stuff that it did, but then it does not give you the part where you might think badly of them. This can be used, this can abuse the Privacy Act, for example, in the EU, and it can allow certain information to go through AI models and certain information not, while the user thinks this is the full truth and this is an unbiased opinion. This is also in the perfect cases, but we don't also talk about the unintended cases that AI might be used in. One of my colleagues is in Africa, and they say that sometimes when the teachers in elementary school have internet, they try to get pictures online of animals to show their students about animals, about other countries, and the only truth they know is that static pictures. So imagine those communities being a target to a misinformation campaign where you have AI generated images. How can you explain to this audience that only knew the truth through static images because they don't have enough access to internet that there's something called AI generation and these images need to be fact-checked? I believe this is very, very important. I think scenario playing and serious games and education is not just for computer science students or people in that discipline, but it's also it should be a part of the policies of companies who are deploying this technology as a way to humanize and to imagine further scenarios of how the technology is being used. In this speedy, extremely fast moving world, we need to think for 2 minutes and say, okay, if I deploy this tomorrow, what might the impact be? And who do I need to measure and imagine that impact? And the second question is more important. And I believe this is one of the key messages that we're here to deploy. And this is part of conferences like this, where we bring diverse people and have messages, discuss, and see other aspects too.
All right. Thank you so much, Tema. If we could go back one slide, please. All right, so now I'll pass it off to Ayaz to speak a little bit more about the use of serious games for teaching AI fairness.
Yes, I can hear myself, so it means actually you can also hear me. Today I will talk a little bit about the serious games, and I will also show you one game that I made and we played last month in Switzerland at Global Cyber Conference. So it could be good examples that actually how we use the game there to teach the cybersecurity or cyber literacy. But before I start talking about everything, let's talk about the games and the serious games. Maybe it's the first time even you heard about this term, serious games. The main difference between the game and the serious game is that actually when you play the game, you just play for the sake of getting entertained, just to achieve something. But in the case of the serious games, you have total different ultimate goal. For example, let's say is actually if your game is about the health, let's say, then your ultimate goal is to get healthier. If the game is about education, then your ultimate goal is to learn something or to teach something in a very, very good way. So you don't care actually you get entertained or not, but your first goal is total different thing. But of course, then it comes to entertainment, the other stuff. So the main difference between the serious games and the games is that actually you have the one goal, and beyond this goal, you also have some kind of things to achieve, let's say. I also did the research about the serious games, whether they really help the learner to achieve something or not. But I also put another research that was carried by other co-researchers about the serious games and their effectiveness. And the research shows that actually when you use the games, it generally positively impacts the motivation, engagement, and academic outcome. So in the general case that actually you will have a very, very good results from the games. But having said this, I also want to say that actually not all games are good for everyone. So hereby we need to highlight the importance of personalized learning. But as I mentioned, in most of the cases, the serious games are considered as a very, very efficient tool to teach hard topics, something like AI or let's say these STEM subjects. And why these games are good, another perspective is that most of the games are simulation based. So even if you play the board game, or let's say actually if you play the other strategy games, in most of the cases you get the simulation from the real life. So while you play the game, maybe your brain doesn't understand that actually what's happening there, but actually you learn something there which can be implemented in the daily life or in the real life as well. So that's very, very strong tool actually nowadays. And I also put in the last bullet point, I put some types of the game, but today I will particularly talk about the puzzle game, which is very, very good way of this puzzle game is the escape room game. And what happens there is that actually you have the challenge in the game, and you try to do some kind of actions, you try to solve this challenge, and once you solve this, then you move to another level and another level and another level, and you just try to escape the room, let's say. If you can go to the next slide, please. And next one, please. Great.
Sorry, we cannot see the slides, if you're sharing them, because we cannot see them.
Sorry, everyone. Bit of a technical issue. All right, while we work on that, could you get started?
Yeah. I will just briefly talk about this game. I will stand up because I also put some games from these games that I prepared with one game designer from Portugal. And the game's name is the Duck Code. And the idea is that actually, if you can go to the next slide, please. So the idea is that actually we have a hacker, and the hacker did the hacking in the 4 cities previously in Europe. So the story starts with like that, and then it is the one hotel in Zurich, and the idea is that the 5th attack was going to happen or is going to happen in this hotel room, and the players are put in this hotel room, and that they try to make sure that actually they find some kind of clues so that they can stop this hacking. So the narration of narrative of the game works like this. And it's pretty much simple clues, so we didn't use actually anything hard, because the idea was that actually if you put here some kind of coding challenge or something like this, not everyone is going to solve this. So we had the really, really simple clues, which also helped them to learn some kind of cyber literacy, but at the same time really get entertained. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yes, so again, we had the 4 hacks happened, and the next one is going to happen in Zurich, and our hacker left some of his belongings in this room, and in this, I will show you some of these the items in the room so that you can understand actually what kind of belongings we are talking about, and why even we use these belongings in the game, because I guess that's very important point to highlight. If you go to the next slide, please. So now in the next slides, I will talk about the 6 different things to you. So if you want to use the game, or if you want to create your own game, then you can just take a note, or I don't know, just keep in your minds that actually those are the most efficient, or those are the main techniques that actually you need to implement. So here our question is that what you can do as a professional to make sure that the game is engaging and it really teaches something. If you can go to the next slide, please. So the first one is the narrative. When I started introducing the game, if you remember, I started directly talking about some kind of background information, right? Like the hacking happened in some countries, it came to the Zurich, and actually we had the one game master. Basically, this is the person who was leading the game. The game master was pretending to be the detective in the game. So he was in the same room with our players, and he was showing some kind of things, and he was just trying to pretend that actually he is also trying to solve this thing with them. So the first rule is that actually you really need to have the good narration in the game. If you don't have the narration, it generally fails actually. Can we go to the next slide, please? This progressive difficulty, what does it mean is that actually in the first clue, let's say that in your game, if you have the 3 or 4 clues, you always should start with the basic one, and if you use the basic, then most of the time actually your game fails again. So the idea here in this game techniques is that you always have the level 1, let's say difficulty 1. In the level 2 you have at least a little bit more difficulty. If you don't have the more difficulty, then it's also another problem. And in our case, we also implement the same thing. And here maybe it's also good to mention that actually you don't have to have so many challenges in one game. We had only 2 challenges actually. We just had the one basic and one very, very hard one. Can we go to the next one, please? And the realistic scenario. So here we bought a pot from the shopping, and what we did is actually we broke this pot in the room. And why did we do this is actually normally if you run away from there, highly possible that actually you crash something and something fall down, right? And in the game we did these things a lot, like we just threw away some books, some glasses fall down, and there was some juice on the floor. So this kind of things actually, when you have this really realistic things that actually happen, or some kind of actions in the game, the most of players actually really like it. You can also integrate this kind of realistic things in the game as well. For example, in our case we were using the pieces of the pot here, just pieces of the pot, to create some kind of challenge for the players. So that's why we didn't only create this realistic scenario but also use them as part of the challenge. Can we go to the next slide, please? The clear objective. So when you play the game, at least I guess it's the core of all the learning activities, not only the serious games, but it's pretty much important in the games as well. So basically, when you have the game, you cannot tell the players that you will win when you escape the room, right? Because it's not a pretty much objective. You have to be clear that actually what are the exact things that actually they need to do. For example, in our narration, we started by saying that you will have the 2 clues, and the first part is there and the second part is there. So they had the clear goals or clear objectives actually what they are going to do. By the way, in this game, just since it is in the picture, I also want to say that actually we used exact documents that we tried to find from the public resources as a crime office. So we really pretend like it's the real document from the crime office. That's why it has too much detail there. Can we go to the next one, please? Yes. And now, actually, my colleague Melissa is going to talk about the project.
Yeah, so now we'll pass it off to Melissa to talk about project-based training for practical learning.
Hi, everyone. So we've seen through the interactive example that Ayaz gave us how we can transform very abstract ideas such as AI fairness into tangible and engaging ones. But the idea is, how do we scale these approaches, and how do we use project-based learning? How do we use it to transform these experiences into sustainable and teaching methods and impactful methods that we can use in that are non-formal, such as scout groups, community spaces, youth movements, etc. So I'm going to talk about 3 things. The first answer is, why use gamification for project-based learning? So gamification that uses games, challenges, and simulation is a natural fit for project-based learning. But why? Because first of all, it encourages active problem solving and critical thinking, but also it creates a very flexible environment to learn. So it makes learning accessible because usually we're used to traditional curricula where we have to follow it. But in these examples, we have the flexibility to experiment around in the places that doing these games. And also, it builds engagement through clear objective, realistic scenarios, and the progressive difficulty that Ayaz talked about previously. Second question that you might ask is why use settings and why do these settings work? So, non formal educational environments such as scout groups, youth clubs, and community spaces are ideal for project based learning because they break down the barriers of participation for youth. So, we have more flexibility to experiment, as I said, and we don't have the barriers of who has access in terms of financials to access these places or not. And it fosters collaborative learning where people work in groups and they learn about empathy and they build collectively ownership over the solutions that they come up with. And finally, it enables real world customization. So, youth can adapt challenges to local contexts. So, they can adapt the game, for example, to local AI fairness issues, such as accessibility to schools or the technological resources that are available or not. The third thing I want to talk about is impact. So, how do we scale the impact? Project based learning doesn't just stop when the activity ends, it creates a kind of ripple effect that goes on. So, if, for example, someone in a scout group creates an AI challenge game about AI fairness, they can take this game to another scout group, to another school, to another youth club. And so, from one idea, you can generate multiple ideas, and it creates this ripple effect because participants gain ownership of the game that they've created, and it can be adapted to multiple communities. So, it's not just like a fixed game that they've created and it only works within their context. So, I just want to say that project based learning, supported by gamification, empowers communities to democratize access to AI fairness and AI fairness education. So, by integrating clear objectives, by creating realistic scenarios, by doing this progressive difficulty way of learning stuff, we can bridge the global concepts that are sometimes very complex and that we're not able to break down, such as AI fairness, to local context and lived realities, and we can make learning more inclusive, engaging, and scalable. So, one last thought to leave you with is think about the communities that you live in, think about the youth that are around you within these community spaces, and how can you use project based learning methods to introduce them to topics such as AI fairness and ensure that the message scales beyond just the session that you're giving or the room that you're in. Thank you.
Okay, great. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you, Melissa. All right, so now we're launching into a Q&A panel discussion. We'll start off with a couple of questions we have from our end, then I'll open up the floor to any questions that the audience may have. So I will start off with our online speaker, Tema. So Tema, my question for you is how can we ensure that the methods used to teach AI fairness and governance are culturally adaptable and accessible across diverse education systems globally?
I think this has two main factors that we need to take in mind. The first one is grassroots effort. It's really damaging that technology comes from top and to bottom when we go from a global scale to local communities, because no matter how we try to understand the context, we can never get it as the person who's living there. And luckily, because the technology is such spreading worldwide, we can always find individuals within those communities who understand the local reality, but also has the enough qualifications or at least the ability to connect with those global entities and then get them to speed to the local entities circumstances, whether it was internet access, any cultural difference. It could be the simple story I told you about in classrooms where you don't have much access to internet or materials. And if reached to the right person, it could impact a change in the technology itself. The second thing, as I always say, it's the feedback loop. We can't always say that when we put this little button that says feedback or support, that it's enough motive or it's suitable for everyone to report through it. We need to go and see what actually motivates people to make an impact and to deliver their voices. And most importantly, how can we make sure that those voices that have been delivered are actually getting the counter feedback they deserve. So if I tell one company that their videos do not have enough markdown and they look too realistic and could be used in misinformation, and then I don't see any impact, it will disencourage me to provide feedback again. And that will create frustrated users from one end, but also a broken loop of understanding and feedback from the other. So it's mainly grassroots work. It's empowering individuals and making their voices heard by updates, by working within the community to provide solutions that work for them.
Response, Taylor. So I will now pass off the next question for you. What strategies would you recommend for measuring the effectiveness of interactive tools such as simulations or serious games and teaching complex concepts like algorithmic fairness?
I guess we already discussed about how games are good for this teaching, especially hard subject. Actually, there has been also research actually why people are using the games, and actually one of the reasons actually, for example, if you want to teach biology or physics, it's very, very hard subject to teach. So that's why they were just trying to find some ways, and one of these way is serious games. But I guess the question here maybe we need to ask is that what type of game I need to use? Because for example, if I am a teacher, the first question come to my mind is that actually there are dozens of games, like the board games, simulation games, strategy games, like that. Which one to use in my classroom? And actually the best way is to do this, actually you do some test iterations that actually one day you start with the board game, in the second day you play the strategy game, in the third game you play the puzzle game, and you just try to see actually which one is the best for your entire classroom, because I guess that was the best strategy to do. And that was the one thing actually we did with one biology teacher in our research. So I would say is actually testing different games and trying to see actually which one is much more impactful, at least from the eyes of the teacher.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Our next question goes to Melissa. So, Melissa, my question for you. What are the key challenges youth groups may face in implementing project-based training, learning for AI governance? And how can policymakers support these initiatives?
Okay. I'm going to talk about one challenge that I think is essential and affects a lot of other things, and it's access. It's lack of access in terms of resources, but also in terms of expertise. So a lot of youth movements lack the expertise in terms of mentorship, but also in terms of the technology that is being used or the tools that are provided to them. So 3 things that I think are very important to policymakers to take into consideration. The first thing is, of course, investing in infrastructure to have better access to digital tools and also to digital literacy programs. The second thing is to create partnerships. Create partnerships not just between governments and private sectors, but also between the civil society sector. And in that way, there's bigger room to share expertise from both sides. Third thing that is the most important is to support the flexible learning networks or frameworks that are available out there. So when you give flexibility to the participants or to the people creating these initiatives, you have more room to experiment, to fail, and then to build upon it. And this is a very important concept when it comes to project-based learning and the whole process that is used. So if these 3 conditions are met, then for sure the challenges would be less challenging, let's say, for the people who are trying to do this. And youth will be empowered in that way to not just learn about this concept, but also be part of the solutions that are being created and have it be more flexible in terms of contextualization and the communities that they live in, and that way it's more relatable to them. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that, Melissa. Now I will open up the floor to the audience if anyone has any questions to ask our wonderful speakers. Online as well, so both online and on-site. Gultan, if you have any questions through the Zoom Q&A, please let us know and we'd be happy to answer any of the questions as well. All right, go ahead. All right, I'll come up to you and give you the mic. Sorry, excuse me.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the speakers for the great information. I have just only one question, which is related to the screen time and how we can control, knowing that these tools is really very beneficial, and with a very good intention to improve and develop, how we can manage the screen time and maybe the ergonomic. The impact of the screen time or the excessive screen time.
Thank you.
Should I? Yeah.
Yes, I think if whoever wants to go.
Yes, very, very, very good question. Actually, it has a name in the academia as well. It's called like the cyber disease. Like that, it's not only when you watch the screen too much or when you use the VR or AR, your brain loses itself, and if you watch your phone too much, your head is going to ache too much, and that's why it's called like the cyber disease. That's very good point. Actually, I know some information is actually what could help for this, but actually, it is still a very, very huge problems, particularly for these immersive technologies, because everyone is talking about these technologies, but when it comes to using them, actually, it's very challenging because not anyone can use it for a longer time. So normally, it depends on the learner's age, or a little bit more detailed, of course, is needed to say something exactly, but normally, at least from the one of the research that actually I did, if the children's age is between the 8 to 12, then the normal playing time for the educational games should be maximum 40 minutes. So it's considered like the one lesson per day, it's enough. Like normally one lesson is approximately 40 minutes in the countries that actually I live in. So it's 40 minutes is acceptable. But of course, if you get higher, I know that actually you get to play with more fun, and there are also other dimensions as well. For example, are you using this time only to play some games? Because also some games are designed in a way that actually it doesn't impact you that much, that actually you don't have to really make your eyes tired. So it really depends on the game, but most of the time, like the shortest answer is 40 minutes if the children's age is up to 12.
I can add to that on what Ayaz said. It really depends on the game that you're aiming for. A lot of the games that can be created don't even need to use screen or have screen time. And this is exactly one of the points we talked about, the flexibility of these kinds of settings. You can do a whole game about AI fairness and education in outdoor settings where you wouldn't even need any screen or screen time. And you can relay the message in a creative way. So I think it really depends on the game, how you want to design it, what's the context you're in, and what are the resources provided as well.
Okay, thank you. Tema, is there anything to add?
I would echo what Melissa said on the flexibility of hybrid games, especially for children. And I think that's a very important topic, because oftentimes we focus on the digital solution staying in a digital world, where we miss the main the core idea that it depends on logic. And at the end of the day, if you're not gonna do, if you want to humanize something, you don't need a screen for you to tell you how to humanize it. You just imagine, you use your imagination, you use relevant cases and scenarios, and that does not necessarily need a screen for you to do.
All right, perfect. Thank you, everyone. Do we have any other questions from the audience? So I'm standing up in case I need to hand the mic to anybody. Any other questions? All right, perfect.
Yeah. So I think like one question or query that I have is when it comes to contextualizing like project-based learning or even engaging learning or non-formal education, many times what happens is that the if you do not bring in or the elements, trying to bring all those elements as it is, like bringing the originality, when you contextualize it, that tends to really degrade the level of engagement or the brightness of that product. So, have you any examples of any, contextualized project-based learnings or initiatives that really has depicted, that originality or has not even like degraded with what it is supposed to be? So, we'd love to know that. Yeah.
My question is recently there have been a number of parents and teachers complaining about children using ChatGPT, whether to learn or to do assignments. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. Do you have any tips on how to teach children use ChatGPT in your own context? Thank you.
All right, so I guess if we could tackle maybe each speaker answers one question, I think is most efficient.
I can answer the first question. So I have a lot of examples we can even discuss after the session if you're interested. It really depends on the trying to contextualize. So for example, I was part of a training that teaches about peace education, and peace is a very broad subject that can be perceived in a different way in different contexts. And so this program is done around the world in different schools and in different communities. The idea is you keep the same concept, you can even keep the same game, but you have to change the instructions within the game. So for example, we used to do a game about human rights, okay? And we have to show the difference between visible and invisible violence, and we show them real life examples. So in every community or country that we go to, we change these examples of scenarios and get scenarios from within the same community or country, so that the children can relate to the stories that they're reading. So instead of just saying that bullying happened in a school, we give a specific example about a specific type of thing that is usually mentioned in bullying within that community. So that's a very small example, but it doesn't devalue the concept or the idea you're trying to portray. It makes it even more relatable. So that's the idea about contextualization. You can have a set of games that you can take around, but you can't keep it exactly the same. So that's just a very short example.
All right.
Yeah, and I will take the second question, which was about this. Let's start from one thing. If you didn't know, it's actually already AI, at least the mother of this boy is saying that actually AI already killed his son. So if you didn't read the news, like in the beginning of the November, one guy did the suicide, and that there is still investigation, but actually there is very high possibility that actually it was because of the AI, because AI basically was misleading. And again, we can discuss it actually how it happened and why it happened. And it happened in the characterize.ai. If you know the tool, that was that. So it's not the ChatGPT. And coming back to your question about, I guess assignment is even the best case that actually they just use it for the cheating, but I guess they are even using for other stuff. And actually, it's not even the children. I know pretty much many people that actually they treat ChatGPT as their psychologists, which shouldn't be the case. So I guess here the main important thing is that actually this AI literacy come to the stage, because when what's the first education we get in our lives is that in the school, at least most of us learn how to read and write, and that's called literacy. And when you become a little bit older and older, someone teaches you how to use the computer, and that's called digital literacy. And someone comes and they teach you how to be safe in the internet, then you learn a little bit cyber literacy. And I guess now it's the time to highlight the importance of the AI literacy. And actually many governments are doing some stuff about this. I know that Netherlands and also in the United Arab Emirates, they have the huge initiation about this AI literacy and particularly prompt engineering, so that you don't get to believe that what the AI always tells you, but you also have the enough knowledge to understand actually what's wrong and what's not. And if you don't know the word about the hallucination, is like it generally happens to us as a human being, like we think actually something exists, but it doesn't. And it's the same thing with the LLMs, these AI tools. They give you the something, and they pretend that actually they are telling the truth, but they don't tell the truth. They just hallucinate because it's just the LLM, and they just try to give you some random answer. So the AI literacy basically helps you to not to get to these hallucinations, and to make sure that actually you use these things efficiently. So my short answer would be really focus on this AI literacy. And I guess it's not only for the children. At least I know that half of my friends or people around me, they don't have the enough AI literacy, I guess, to be able to use these tools.
All right. Thank you. Tema, is there anything to add for any of the questions?
Yes, I want to add something on the second question, because I've been working a bit with child safety online, child online safety, and this has been a reoccurring question, and I think this has to do with how we're approaching AI tools, and especially generative text tools. The first one is, it's very, very important to make sure that the children know that this is not reality, or at least it's not the full reality. And this is what I was talking about not having comparative contexts. Even us, when we're dealing with ChatGPT, when we're in our own in the chat, we think this is the full truth, and we don't have any way to compare that or to verify it. So for children, it's important to be like, okay, this is the answer from one AI model. How about we try other AI models? Or how about we also try humans and ask like the teacher or the mother or the sibling? And that way, they are built with a comparative system that they can always verify and check whatever is coming out of the internet, really, not just AI models. This was also a problem with Facebook before AI models came about. It just got upgraded with LLMs. The second part is, what is the goal of the homework? And I think this is a critical problem for all educators. If the goal is just to memorize or just to achieve an essay, then you're failing as an educator to actually adapt with the technology. And the important thing is that you're trying to teach your child how to have critical thinking using the LLMs. So instead of being like, okay, instead of it writing your homework, how about you ask it what subjects you can write about? And then also make sure they understand that whatever is coming out of this LLM should not be satisfying for them to present on their behalf. That they have this energy and they have this creativity and they have this style in writing that no AI language model can replicate. And no matter how perfect, there's no such thing as perfect or this perfect answer that we can get from the AI models. It's the answer that you actually generate using your imagination, your experiences, whatever language that you have. And should be rewarded, not just the grammatically correct, the perfect language answer. And I think this falls heavily on the educator's side.
All right. Thanks so much, Tema. Okay. Is there any other questions from the audience? Okay, so I think we are going to wrap it up. Can I please go on to the next slide? All right, everyone. Thank you so much for your time and your attention for this workshop. We have provided actually a digital handbook that you can access. If you could please go on to the next slide. So here are some resources that we've included for yourself. You can scan the QR code, you get a digital handbook that way. It has a lot of our key takeaways from the session, and as well as some of the presentation slides and team contact details. So if you'd like to connect with us through LinkedIn and the like, we have all of that for you. Once again, thank you so much for your time and attention, and it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.